These stories will make you think twice before staying home alone in a storm. I was house-sitting for my cousin over the weekend. She had flown out to Denver with her husband, but her dog, Max, stayed behind. He was a small rescue and got nervous during heavy rain, which was unfortunate because the forecast called for a massive downpour all weekend. Max was usually pretty low maintenance though. He'd just curl up wherever he liked and nap most of the day. The storm had already started the day before she left, and by Saturday it hadn't let up. I'd spent the night without any issues, and Max seemed okay too, just a little jumpy with the thunder. That morning, I lounged on the big armchair in her sunroom, sipping tea and reading. I loved being at her place because it sat on a cliffside near the Oregon coast, totally secluded, peaceful and a little eerie in the best way. Around midday, the landline rang. This was back when everyone still had one. I thought maybe it was her trying to check in, but the screen just said private number, so I let it ring out. A few minutes later, it rang again, same caller ID. I still didn't answer, but this time, a message came through the answering machine. A low male voice spoke. He only said my cousin's name, like a question. Sabrina, then silence, then a click. It caught me off guard. Could have been a relative or friend, maybe someone who didn't know she was out of town. I texted her just to let her know someone had called the house line. She didn't reply, which didn't worry me too much. I figured she was sightseeing or something. Over the next few hours, 2 more calls came in, both from the same private number. No messages this time. I didn't think much of it. I cooked a late lunch and spent the rest of the afternoon being lazy. Around 9 p.m., I decided to watch a movie upstairs in the guest room. Halfway through, I remembered to check on Max, make sure he had enough food and water. When I went downstairs, I noticed Max standing right by the sliding glass door that led to the back patio. He was staring intently through the narrow slit in the curtain, like he was expecting it to open. I called his name, and he turned his head briefly but quickly resumed staring at the door. It gave me chills that I walked over cautiously and peeked through the edge of the curtain. The storm had fogged up the glass, so the view was hazy. Still, I could make out a dark shape, vague, unmoving, just beyond the reach of the porch light. My stomach sank. Someone was out there. I stayed frozen, staring, trying to figure out if it was a trick of the light or something real. But the shape didn't budge. 2, maybe 3 minutes passed. No knock, no sound. I started to convince myself I was just being paranoid. If someone was there, wouldn't they make themselves known? I left the door to refill Max's bowls and grab some snacks for the rest of the movie. When I passed by the patio again, I glanced out once more and noticed something was different. The dark shape had vanished. Had someone really been standing there? Feeling uneasy, I picked Max up and took him back upstairs with me. I put the movie back on but couldn't focus. The sense of dread was growing in my chest, and Max kept twitching in his sleep. 30 minutes later, he jumped off the bed and trotted toward the guest room door. He didn't bark, didn't scratch, he just stood there, staring at the crack between the door and the floor, just like he had at the sliding door. My pulse spiked. I whispered his name, but he didn't look back. He was focused. Frozen. I crept to the door and pressed my ear against it. Nothing. I crouched down slowly to peek underneath and immediately stumbled backward in shock. Feet. There were feet standing just outside the door. Barely inches away, my eyes darted to the knob. It wasn't locked. My hand flew to it, twisting the bolt as fast as I could. As soon as the lock clicked, I heard them bolt, running down the stairs. Heavy footsteps, then nothing. I called 911, then tried my cousin again. By the time police arrived, the place was empty. No signs of forced entry, nothing missing. The detective said it was likely a stalker, probably the same person who had been calling earlier. They tried to trace the number, but no luck, untraceable. That was basically where it ended. I felt awful for Sabrina. Whoever that man was, it seemed like she was the one he had been watching, not me. Maybe he thought she was alone that weekend. Since I hadn't answered any calls, he might have assumed the house was empty. Maybe he was waiting to ambush her when she came back from her trip. We never found out who he was, or what he really wanted. It happened in early December last year. I had just been let go from my job at a tech startup due to sudden downsizing. Fortunately, I had some savings tucked away to support myself while I searched for a new position. For a few weeks, I was stuck at my apartment in San Diego, endlessly scrolling through job boards on my tablet. The end of week 2, frustration started to set in. I'd applied to everything that seemed even remotely relevant, but hadn't heard back from anyone. I expanded my search to smaller and less-known job sites, hoping to find something new. One afternoon, I finally received an email that felt promising. It was from someone named Marcus, who introduced himself as the hiring lead for a boutique marketing firm. He said his schedule was tight, but he'd like to interview me that night if possible. I wasn't exactly ready, and I didn't feel great about not having time to prepare or ask questions. But I also didn't want to miss the opportunity. I thought agreeing to meet on such short notice might show I was serious. It seemed like a fairly standard digital marketing role, and the salary was competitive that I told him I was in, and Marcus sent me the address, said to be there at 7:45 p.m. I quickly got dressed and drove across town, arriving about 10 minutes early. I hadn't had time to research the company or location, so I wasn't sure what to expect. The address led me to a low, one-story office building on a quiet street near a golf course. The lot was completely empty, and there were no signs or company names anywhere, just a single number on the building. I figured maybe it was a shared office space or something. But every light in the place was off, and there was no sign of anyone else. I double-checked the address and even pulled it up on Google. It all pointed to this exact spot. The number matched. I called the number Marcus had provided in his email, but he didn't answer. I called again a couple more times, still no response. I waited until about 8:05 before I gave up. Something about it felt off. A dark, empty office on a dead-end street. No one picking up, no visible sign of a business. None of it sat right. Disappointed, I drove back to my place and tried to shake off the weird vibe. It had probably just been a mistake, or maybe some kind of scam. I grabbed a soda from the fridge and flopped onto the couch, turning on a late-night true crime documentary. With no job and no schedule, I figured I'd just relax until I got sleepy. But all throughout the evening, I kept hearing odd creaks from the ceiling. Specifically from the upstairs loft area. I glanced outside a few times, thinking maybe it was just the wind, but the trees weren't moving. Still, I wasn't that concerned. It didn't seem like anything unusual. Around 11 p.m., I powered everything off, turned off the downstairs lights, and headed upstairs to bed. I remember getting into bed and falling asleep quickly. Then, at some time later, I suddenly woke up. The room was pitch black. I lay there for a second, confused, and then I heard the same creaking sound. But now it was closer, definitely inside the room. That I turned my head groggily toward the corner of the loft and squinted. And that's when I heard something. A slow, deliberate sliding sound. The closet.it was sliding open. I couldn't move. My body just locked up as I watched the door inch open in the dark. My mind refused to accept what I was seeing until someone stepped halfway out. A figure. Silent. Still. Watching me. That's when I finally moved. I bolted upright, grabbed my phone, and scrambled off the opposite side of the bed. The figure didn't move. He just stood there, barely illuminated by the sliver of moonlight, almost like he thought I couldn't really see him. But I could, with my eyes now adjusted. I knew this wasn't a dream. I ran out of the loft, down the stairs, and straight out the front door, calling 911. As I stood barefoot in my driveway, I stayed outside, staring at the upstairs windows, hoping the intruder wouldn't escape before help arrived. I knew it was risky. He could be armed, but I couldn't just do nothing. Within minutes, 2 officers showed up. I pointed them upstairs and explained what I saw. They entered cautiously and found the man still inside the closet. He didn't resist, didn't say a word, just stared. He looked unhinged. Long, greasy hair, dirty hoodie, pale, sunken face, wide, vacant eyes. It took 2 days before I learned the full story. Apparently, this guy had been posting fake job listings on multiple platforms, luring people in with the promise of well-paid positions. He had collected resumes, mine included, and used the info to track addresses. He broke into my apartment while I was out for the interview and waited for me to come home. He stayed in the house the entire time. hidden, silent. I was sleeping just a few feet away from him. No one ever figured out exactly what he planned to do. He refused to speak. Maybe it was robbery, maybe worse. I'll never know. And that's the part that still keeps me up at night. I live out near the coast, tucked away in a beach house surrounded by nothing but sand dunes and scrubland for miles. The nearest neighbor is about half a mile down the shoreline, and the closest town is a 25-minute drive inland. I'm 41 and semi-retired, so my days are slow and simple. This particular day had been overcast with thick fog rolling in since early morning. Around noon, I stepped out onto my back deck for a smoke and to listen to the waves crashing in the distance. I stayed out there longer than I meant to, probably close to an hour, just enjoying the peaceful gloom when I noticed someone approaching on the coastal trail that it was hard to see clearly with the fog, but they were riding one of those fat tire electric bikes, kicking up sand as they came closer. I thought they might have just taken a wrong turn, but they didn't pass by. Instead, they pulled right up to the path beside my house and stopped by the side gate. The person had a helmet with a visor covering their face, and they just sat there for a moment, staring toward the house. It was only when they saw me standing there watching them that they finally turned around and rode away without a word. That I found it strange. No one ever comes through here unless they know someone or are looking for trouble, but I tried to shake it off. It was probably just a lost tourist. The wind picked up and the fog got even thicker, so I went back inside, made some coffee, and spent most of the afternoon on a call with my cousin. Later, I took a short nap. The rest of the day felt normal until around 8 p.m., when the fog thickened to the point that I couldn't even see the end of my deck. There was a storm coming too, thunder in the distance and gusts rattling the windows. And then, through it all, I heard the faint buzz of an electric motor outside. It had that same deep, humming whine I'd heard earlier. My heart dropped. I walked to the front window and saw a single headlight slowly cutting through the haze. My first thought wasn't even why they were back. It was why anyone would be out here in this weather. As they approached, the headlight suddenly shut off, and the silhouette disappeared into the fog. I couldn't see where they went. I waited, but they didn't come up to the gate this time. No sound, no movement, just fog and wind and silence. Calling the cops out here wouldn't do much. By the time they'd arrive, whoever it was would be long gone. I grabbed the emergency flare gun from the closet, my only real means of protection out here, and started quietly checking all the windows. The next 20 minutes were a blur of pacing and scanning. I didn't see anything until I looked out the small side window by the kitchen. Through the shifting fog, I spotted movement, just a dark blur slipping around the back of the house. It was quick, but enough to jolt me. Then came the footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps squishing through the wet sand and seaweed right up against the walls of the house. Every time I moved to a different window, the sounds shifted too, like they were trying to stay just out of sight. My instincts screamed that this wasn't someone looking for help. They were testing the place, maybe trying to find a way in. I quietly crept into the garage and got into my Jeep. I opened the door, backed out onto the sandy lot, and turned the high beams and roof lights on. The house lit up in an instant, and there he was, right outside the living room window stood a man dressed in black from head to toe, soaked from the fog and rain, holding a rusted crowbar in one hand. He was trying to peek through the window, probably didn't even hear the Jeep over the wind. As soon as the lights hit him, he bolted. I watched him sprint behind the house, then hop on the e-bike lying half buried in the dunes. He sped off into the dark. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the car with the lights on and my eyes wide. The next morning, I drove into town and filed a report with the sheriff's office. Turns out there had been a few similar cases in the area recently. Nothing confirmed, but they think someone's been scoping out remote homes along the coast. Seeing that crowbar, I think I already know what he wanted. I'm just grateful I didn't have to find out for sure.